Welcome back to another episode of C3. I'm Courtney Groskin, and I'm here with... You heard that right. I'm here by myself today. Unfortunately, Violet has decided to step away from C3. All that coaching we did around work-life balance, Violet realized that she needed to spend more time at home with her girls. We wish her the best. Be sure to tune in next month to find out who my new co-host is. Let's get back to our regularly scheduled content. We're so fortunate to have Dr. Heather Lyon join us today. Dr. Heather Lyon has a PhD in educational administration and a master's in reading from the University at Buffalo. She's a consultant, speaker, and author, blogger, and superintendent. Heather's books include Engagement is Not a Unicorn, It's a Narwhal, The Big Book of Engagement Strategies, and 50 Ways to Engage Students with Google Apps. Welcome to C3, Heather.
Heather, welcome to C3 Podcast. We are thrilled to have here to be able to engage in this conversation for our listeners. How are you doing today?
I'm really excited to be here. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
We are just excited to be able to share this. I even shared the name of one of your books today with a colleague, and they were like, what? Now it makes me want to pick it up. So we're excited to share you with our listeners, and we'll dive right in. Will you start by just telling us about your background and how you have gotten to where you are right now?
Yeah, I was the kid who wanted to be a writer and went to school to get a degree in English. And I needed to not live with my parents for the rest of my life. So teaching was the backup plan. In truth, I was really lucky because my cooperating teacher, my first one, her passion for teaching was contagious. And so I realized that, oh, wait, I want to be an English teacher. And they get to assign people what they want to read and write about. So I was like, oh, I could totally do this. And then I needed a new backup plan. And so administration became the new backup plan. And honestly, I've spent much more of my career being an administrator, several different titles. And now I'm a superintendent, which is really exciting. But I've been a staff developer, a teacher, coordinator, you name it, I've probably done it in education, pre-K through. I also teach people working on an additional master's, and I teach curriculum leadership with them. So I've worn many hats, and I actually did become a writer. So that's what brings me to you today. So that came about very quickly because I had been trained in doing classroom observations, and people were talking to me about engagement at the time. And that got my wheels turning. I started talking to people about what my wheels were turning about. And they said, oh, where did you get that? And I said, no, that's mine. And they said, you should write a book. And when you are somebody who wanted to be an author, that's all you need. Somebody to tell you you should write a book. So that's what got me here today.
Well, we're so glad that you wrote that book so we can have this wonderful conversation with you. Your book, Engagement is Not a Unicorn, It's a Narwhal, reframes the concept of engagement in such a memorable way. What inspired you to choose a narwhal, and what does the metaphor mean for educators working to foster true engagement?
So for your listeners, not everybody does know what a narwhal is. So a narwhal looks like a dolphin and a unicorn had a baby. It's a mammal swimming around in our oceans right now, and you've probably seen it on a 3-year-old's t-shirt, or if you've seen the movie Elf. And so the idea is that a narwhal is a real thing, and yet some people don't believe that it's a real thing, just like engagement is a real thing. But if you think of engagement as students standing up and applauding for you at the end of a lesson, then that's a unicorn. That's a mythical thing. And really what had happened was I started writing the book, the manuscript, and it's sequential in that it talks about continuum of engagement. And there are 4 levels. So non-compliant, compliant, interested, and absorbed. So in the book, it's sequentially talking about what does it mean to be non-compliant? What does it mean to be compliant? What does it mean to be interested? What does it mean to be absorbed? And then it goes into not just the what, but the so what and the now what. And I got to the part in the book where I started to think about, well, what does it mean to be absorbed in a classroom? And I kind of hit a wall. because I knew what absorption looked like outside of classrooms, but in classrooms, absorption is actually quite rare. And I set the manuscript aside and I was running that summer. And so I had time to think. And I was thinking about it like, well, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe absorption doesn't exist inside of schools. And I was like, no, it's a narwhal. It's real. It's out there. You just have to know where to look and what to look for. And it's not a unicorn, this mythical thing. It's a real thing. And actually, Dave Burgess, who wrote Teach Like a Pirate, I had been in communication with him when I was in the early stages of writing the book. And then I reached out to him when I finished the manuscript. And I was telling him about this concept of the narwhal because it didn't yet really have a title. And he's like, you got that, kid. Like, like he goes, I can picture so many people like in an audience wearing like the narwhal horn on their head. So really, he inspired me to make sure that narwhal was in the title.
It's such a great catching title. I mean, I don't think there's another title out there to rival that.
Thank you.
It's such a great hook.
Thank you so much. It's not necessarily the most telling title, but the book is pretty descriptive. So I can hook people with the title and then I can dive into the deeper things in the book.
And I really appreciate you laying out the different levels of engagement. I think that's something a lot of educators and administrators looking for engagement in a classroom struggle with. It's either there or it's not, it seems like in an observation, but there's a continuum of levels here of what to look for in students.
That was the big aha, I think, is that rather than being like an on-off switch on a wall, it's more like a dimmer switch. And so you can be a little bit engaged or a little bit disengaged or a lot of one or the other. And so that's why that continuum is so important. And I felt like a rock star when I really conceptualized those 4 levels. But as an educator, it's not enough to understand, oh yeah, okay, so sure, compliant is better than non-compliant, interested is better than compliant, absorbed is better than interested. But as an educator, what do I do in order to help somebody shift from one level of engagement to another level?
It's so powerful. And I completely agree with the narwhal analogy of being just so clear. And I love you bringing it back to that. It is something real, but sometimes it feels unattainable. And we have to, you being able to share your wrestling with your efficacy and some of those things as well. I laugh. My daughter has always called it a unicorn hopper. So instead of a narwhal at our house, it's called a unicorn hopper from very old stuffy from long ago. But it just, as soon as I saw that title, I read it to my daughter and she goes, oh my gosh, a unicorn hopper coaching book. This is great, Mom. Like, so you're enticing even the next generation of educators possibly. And we want to drill in and share even more of your work and a little deeper understanding in the big book of engagement strategies. You had collaborated with other educators to offer over 50 strategies. Now, obviously, we don't have time for all of those, but can you highlight 1 or 2 of those that have personally surprised you in your terms of impact and why did they impact you in such a way that they did?
Yeah. So I just want to point out that the big book of engagement strategies really came as I was writing Engagement is Not a Unicorn, It's a Narwhal. I had all of these strategies in mind and I was like, the book is already pretty big. I think I have enough strategies to be the start of another book. And the more I interact with people, the more I hear these great things that they're doing that I want to be able to share with others. So furthermore, the contributors to the big book of engagement strategies are practitioners. And so it's really nice to see practitioners supporting other practitioners. So I just want to say the big book of engagement strategies, my name's on the cover. There are dozens of people who contributed to the book and they deserve real recognition. I want to point out okay, let's back this up just a moment because I talked about the engagement continuum And I alluded to that there are leverage points that would shift somebody from one direction to another. If it's all right, if I could dive into kind of what those levers are.
Absolutely. Please.
Okay. So you need to envision a 4-pane window. So I've never met a 2x2 matrix I don't like. It's a great graphic organizer of thinking. So along the bottom of this window, going horizontally, is somebody's relationship to the task. Do they want to do it or don't they want to do it? And that's really the first question you need to ask somebody in order to determine whether or not they're engaged. So that's a leverage point. Do you want to do it? Don't you want to do it? That's pretty simple. And if somebody wants to do it, they're either going to be interested or they're going to be absorbed. Those are your two options. If they are not or if they don't want to do it, they're going to be non-compliant or compliant. So how do you shift somebody? Well, that's the vertical axis. And the vertical axis is the relationship to the person assigning the task or the consequence, neutral term, positive or negative, for doing the task. So somebody who is non-compliant in this window frame, they're bottom left. And so non-compliant people, they don't want to do the task. They don't care about the consequence, positive or negative, for doing the task. And they don't care about the relationship between themselves and the person assigning the task. So my classic example is, I'm not taking out the garbage. I don't want to take out the garbage. I don't like taking out the garbage. I'm not doing it. But if grandma asks me to take out the garbage, I love grandma. I'm not going to let grandma down. I'll take out the garbage. So I'll shift from non-compliant to compliant because of that relationship. And teachers see that, right? When they're talking to other teachers and they're like, wait, that kid is doing their work for you? You're like, yeah, wait, they're not doing their work for you? It's about the relationship sometimes. Sometimes it's about the negative consequence. I don't want to take out the garbage, but you tell me that you are going to fine me money if I don't take out the garbage. I'm doing it. I'm not going to pay you $10 because I don't take out the garbage. And then the last option is, I don't want to take out the garbage, but you're going to pay me to take out the garbage? Okay, I will shift from non-compliant to compliant because I'm going to do it for this reward. Now, let's not get it twisted. Somebody who is compliant does not enjoy the task any more than somebody who is non-compliant. What they enjoy is either the relationship, the positive consequence, or the lack of negative consequence that they are receiving because they're doing it. So that is really critical to understanding how all of these different strategies work. Because if you are working with somebody who is non-compliant, it is a victory to get them to be compliant. So what are the things that you could work on if somebody is non-compliant? You can work on your relationship with them. You can work on the negative consequence, or you can work on the positive consequence, or some combination thereof. And so I personally like to build relationships with people. So one of the strategies that I really like is it's in the big book of engagement strategies. I call them caught tickets. And I literally catch people doing good things. It's a really brief handwritten. It used to be handwritten. Now I type it or whatever, but I send people. I say, this week I caught you being good when you did this thing. And it reinforces the behavior that I want to see more of anyway. So it's a win-win. That small investment of time makes that person feel seen and valued for doing things that they were already doing anyway. So I really love that. Another quick strategy, and this one is to go from compliant to interested. I'm a huge fan of this strategy. It's the almost some learning targets, where you differentiate the learning target itself so the people who are doing the work understand what's expected of them. So in the learning target, all students do this really basic thing. And this really basic thing is really what would be on a 4-point scale, most likely a 2. So the kids who can't do this all thing, they're really a level 1. The kids who can only do this are a level 2. Now, most students should be able to do the bump up from that Those are the level 3 kids. And then in the learning target itself, some students will aim for this highest level. And if you can achieve that highest level, you get the level 4, which is above expectation. So I really love it because it's a great way to differentiate and not a heavy lift. And the reason why this is a shift from non-compliant to compliant is because it crosses that threshold into choice and voice, which is the easiest way. People always ask me, what advice do you have? What's the easy takeaway? How do you get people to be engaged? Well, remember, the lowest level of engagement is interested. Interested is top right. Top right means I like the task and I need some relationship or consequence in order to do the task. Because when the bell rings, interested kids hear the bell and leave. Absorbed kids don't hear the bell. You have to, push them out. Absorbed kids are the kids who come back to you the next day and they tell you all about this, hole that they have drilled deeply into this thing that they're learning about. So my point here with this is that interested is actually the place I encourage folks to target in all classes every day. Absorbed, I've never met anybody who's absorbed in everything. And so absorption is the place you visit, not the place you live. So target interested, and this is a great way to achieve that. And then lastly, I'll just say the last strategy the last strategy in the big book of engagement strategies is room to breathe. And again, this is for people looking for absorption. Like this could really get it. But the concept of room to breathe, and it's by Erin Quinn and Tara Vandertorn out of Canada. They talk about it as inhaling and exhaling. So inhales are texts and other things that you would take in and input, and exhaling is what the students would produce. And I really love that dynamic relationship in learning because so often kids feel so passive, and that passivity causes disengagement. So when you have this inhale, take this in, and this exhale, what are you going to produce based off of what you are inhaling? And giving students the choice in what that exhale looks like is just really powerful and dynamic. Highly recommend it.
Those are some great tangible ways for classroom teachers to start making this shift. What are some ways instructional coaches can help teachers move students into a higher level of engagement?
So, quite honestly, this framework is not a school-based framework that I've developed. It is a human-based framework that I've developed. And you do not have to be pre-K through 12 in order to experience non-compliance, compliance, interest, and absorption. I am sure that there are lots of things that, unfortunately, professionals have to do where they're like, I'd rather not. Paperwork, grading, fill in the blank, right? So I think about coaches and the work that they're doing, and I invite them to use this framework in thinking about the work that they're doing with the adults to help adults garner deeper engagement with what it is they're doing. And again, the easiest way to think about this is through choice and voice. There are certainly states and school districts that are more rigid in terms of what teachers are required to do or assessments they're required to administer. But more often than not, it is an outcome standard with so many different mechanisms to achieve that standard. And we paint ourselves into a corner of doing things one way. And I was an English teacher once upon a time, and I would assign, 120 students the same essay prompt and then wonder why I was crying as I was grading it because of the monotony of having to read the same thing 120 different ways. And it would have taken me very little to think about the standard of what the expected learning outcome was, devise 2, 3, 4 different ways that students could have demonstrated that learning standard outcome, and they would have been more engaged just through the function of their choice, and I would have been more engaged just because I wasn't reading the same thing 120 different times. I do want to say, here's the difference between choice and voice, because we use these terms, right? But do we really know what they mean? So imagine, Courtney, that it is your birthday. Happy birthday, Courtney. And I asked you, where would you like to go for dinner? And just for the ease of this experiment right now, you are going to name a fast food place. So, Courtney, where are we going to go for your birthday dinner?
Taco Bell.
Fabulous. Taco Bell it is. So, Courtney had voice into where we were going. And now I'm going to give her choice because she at Taco Bell cannot order a Big Mac. So she no longer has voice when she gets to the menu. She is choosing the options. So voice is, where do you want to go? Choice is, what are you going to select off of that menu? And so the best and easiest way to insert voice is actually easier to offer people, because you say, here are these 3 choices. The 4th option is, you tell me what you want to do that would still achieve this outcome, and let them decide. So that's the difference between choice and voice. And those 2 pieces are game changers, both for the students, but also the adult who can feel very disengaged doing the same thing repetitively, especially when it is something that the standard or the performance or whatever has low levels of choice for the adult.
I appreciate how you illuminate that voice and choice both with students and with educators, and how really we're trying to do the same thing, and it helps to enhance the relationship when you do that. So it's only going to help with that first piece, because in everything, and you were speaking, you started with those levers, and you always go back to the relationship and the starting there. And that's where we build that solid foundation for good teaching and learning, right? So I appreciate you bringing that to the forefront again.
Thank you.
So I'm sure we have a lot of teachers hooked. Other than reading the book, where can they start? What's one practical step that they could try tomorrow if they want to make an immediate difference in their classroom?
Again, I know I sound like a broken record here, but honestly, first of all, start small. Do one thing. I am, like most teachers, I think we're all perfectionists. I think there's a solid, thread of that woven through educators. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I like to introduce myself that way. Hi, I'm Heather. I was a perfectionist. And what I realized about perfectionism is that it does not give me joy. It gives me anxiety. And quite honestly, I don't like being anxious. And so what actually gives me joy is progress. I love progress. So progress means identifying what the finish line is that you're headed towards, but also, how do you know the mile markers along the way in the marathon? Because when you are 1 mile into a 26.2 mile race, like, you have left the starting line. This is good news. But if all you're thinking about is, I have 25.2 miles left, that is exceptionally discouraging. So I would say, start small. Find one thing. Find one assignment this year that you can, in the first marking period, insert some level of choice and voice, and see how it goes. That would be a really small bite. Oh, here's my new next analogy. I'm full of them. So let's go back. It is now Violet's birthday. Happy birthday. And
Thank you.
yeah, let's imagine that I got you your most favorite, yummy, delicious birthday treat. What would that be, Violet?
Harpo gummy bears.
Really?
Yes, that's my favorite treat.
Okay. So let's imagine I bought you a 1-pound bag for your birthday treat. So does that sound enticing to you?
Absolutely.
Okay, now what if I told you you have to eat this entire 1-pound bag in one bite? Do you still want these gummy bears?
No. No, thank you.
And what's important here about that is people will refuse things that they want if it is not served to them in ways that are manageable.
Mm.
Resistance is generally not to the thing, it's to the how. And so if I told you, you have as long as you want to eat all of these bears, and or what if I told you over the course of this month, we're going to finish this bag, we're going to finish it together. You get to decide how much you want and you can share it with other people to lighten the load here because eating a pound of gummy bears in a month might be a lot. I don't know what your consumption is. I allow myself four for a serving of these gummy bears. People make fun of me about my 4 gummy bears, but and then they get stale because I don't eat them quickly enough. And then I'm like, listen, it's work chewing these stale gummy bears. So I think that it has negative calories because I'm burning more calories than I am consuming.
Your gummy bear strategy. I love it.
Yeah,
I see a future book.
right. The gummy bear strategy.
Oh my goodness. But I love that analogy and thinking of it that way. And in my family, I always said you can't eat an elephant in one bite. So same idea. We have to go one step at a time and give ourselves some grace and honor that there's always a lot on an educator's plate. And any one small shift to elevate that practice is a good shift and a good step forward, right?
Yes.
Well, let's shift just slightly here and let's go to our rapid fire questions. So, as in roughly 30 seconds to a minute or so, let us know what is one strategy every coach should have in their back pocket, according to you?
I think some type of goal setting strategy with accountability. I'm a big fan of Jim Knight's peers goal setting strategy to make it personable or personal. But setting a goal is insufficient. You need somebody to help hold you accountable. And that's really the value of the coach. They get to see you doing the things that you don't get to see. And they're your partner in this. So when they're asking you, how's it going? They're asking you because they're there to help you achieve the things that you want to achieve.
Absolutely. And having a thought partner is so powerful. And somehow Jim Knight always finds his way into one question or other. So here's another episode. We'll put it on the tally board there, Courtney, of how many times we've looped back to Jim. But tell us one more here, Miss Heather, is if you had 60 seconds with a brand new teacher, what's one thing that you would tell them?
I would talk to them about the difference between motivation and engagement. We often use these terms synonymously, but they do not mean the same thing. Motivation is why we do what we do. Engagement is how we feel about what we're doing. So you can be highly motivated to do something that you're disengaged in. And my classic example of this is paying taxes. So I have yet to meet anybody who is engaged in paying taxes. They may be engaged in doing taxes, but they're not engaged in paying taxes. But most people are highly motivated to do it. And when we confuse the difference between motivation and engagement, we are working on the wrong leverage point and we're shifting. And that's where grades come in. Some other time I will digress into grades because grades and engagement work hand in hand. And I feel really strongly about this, but focus less on motivation, why somebody's doing what they're doing, and focus on how they're feeling, which I know I'm long for 60 seconds. So I'll take a pause here.
You're all good. You're all good.
But I will circle back to a conversation that we had earlier in terms of engagement and motivation when we were talking about the levers that shift somebody from one point to another point. If the first question we're asking is, does the person doing the task like what they're doing? Are they engaged? That's the first question, do they like it? You cannot tell by looking whether or not somebody is compliant or interested. You have to talk to somebody. And because the person doing it, taking out the garbage because you're paying them $10 is different than the person who's doing it because they like a clean and tidy environment for themselves. They're both taking out the garbage. And this goes back to how I got started in this in the first place. I was being trained as an administrator to go into people's classrooms and to walk through, and I was being taught to do things like tally up the number of kids who are doing what they're told to do. So I'm being taught this. And then at the same time, I had a coach who was coaching me about what engagement was supposed to look like. And she referred to it as brain sweat. She said, when you go into a gym in physical education class and kids are supposed to be moving, how do you know if they're doing it? Well, you can see it, like they're sweating. You can see their sweat. So you might be able to smell it, sorry. But she said in a classroom that is not performance-based in that same way, how do you know? There should be brain sweat going on. The students should be doing the heavy lift. Well, I don't know if they're doing that lift. If they're doing the lift, like you can see the kids who aren't doing the lift, right? But just because you see somebody doing the work doesn't mean that they're engaged. It means they're doing it. It means they're at least compliant. And by the way, and this is one of the real dangers when it comes to looking at students who are doing the work. It's that teachers get very comfortable with having students purely compliant and instructionally non-compliant. In other words, they're quiet. They're not disrupting class. They turned the book open to the page that they're supposed to. That's what I need them to do. They're not. And so these are kids who can quietly slip through the cracks. These are kids who can get, I used to be an 11th grade honors English teacher. And some of the kids who I had in my 11th grade honors English class were really nice kids. They were exceptionally polite and respectful, and they did their work. But that didn't mean that they were at the level that they needed to be in terms of the quality of their work. But because they had been behaviorally compliant in kindergarten, first, second, third, all the way up to 10th grade, they were put into this honors class. And I was expecting then in 11th grade that they would have skill that they didn't have. How did that happen? It happened because they were nice kids. They were good kids. And that's just as dangerous as a kid who we let sleep in the back of class because they're not being disruptive, even though they have opted out of the learning expectation and we're doing nothing about it. Kids deserve us to care about whether or not they're actually learning.
Oh, what a beautiful sentiment to end that up and tie it with a bow. And we're just so grateful to share your expertise and your wealth of knowledge with our listeners. And we love that you had that whole full circle moment of trying all things in education and becoming your dream of a writer. So we'll be looking for your next book out, and make sure you let us know when you have something coming down the pike.
Thank you. I would encourage you and your listeners to check out my blog. I write a weekly blog post during the school year. And so there's much more where this came from, and it's all free.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. You beat me to the third question of where can we learn more from and with you?
That would be the best place. I do have a couple of contributions that are coming out soon. One is connected to engagement and AI. So that's a really interesting pathway too. So thank you so much for having me and for the amazing work that you guys are putting out into this world. We're all better for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to Heather for really making engagement strategies visible. How might you support teachers with student engagement? Thanks for listening to another episode of C3.
C3, Connecting, Coaches, Cognition. Whose thinking will you mediate today?